The Awakening of Joel Singer by Scott McCaffrey. Narrated by Luke Welland. Part 12. Hostile Takeover. Dr. Harrington was oblivious to the gawking onlookers below. His eyes focused south. The mini-cyclone enveloping him began to move in that direction. Something down below was moving even faster on the pavement, despite myriad obstacles. One of the CVs was running in block-long leaps, arcing over cabs as if hopping over the curb, landing in between other pedestrians with preternatural precision and grace before glide-leaping again, turning the claustrophobically imposing landscape of Manhattan into a child's obstacle course. Others soon joined. Francesca turned back to the TV coverage showing Dr. Harrington and about 50 CVs headed downtown. The CVs leapfrog a group of hundreds of waiting ferry passengers on the long slab of a dock before bounding about 200 feet in the air, all within seconds of each other as stunned onlookers looked skyward. The camera switched to Dr. Harrington. The CVs were converging on him, and Francesca saw that their leaps had been merely running starts for Dr. Harrington to pluck them out of the air, telekinetically, and into formation. He swung and shoved the CVs into place, moving his hands methodically as he hung suspended over the Hudson. Within moments, his charges had formed into an inverted V-shaped pattern, much like a flock of geese, and for the same reason. The group started to move. Dr. Harrington was pulled behind the group even as he pushed them forward with kinetic waves, pulling himself by an unseen tether. The group shot off with a slight lag for Dr. Harrington, as though a rope was tied from him to a cannonball he had just fired. They were soon out of sight of the awestruck crowd and heading southwest. Frank Mackey looked down to see his wrists and hands turning purple, his limbs numb under the vice grip of his own chair's arms and legs. His back ached like he'd been in the pillory. The clock said he'd been trapped on the floor for an hour, but it felt like 3 times as long. Hearing the mixture of groans and soft crying that had replaced the futile yells and wails, he knew the feeling was mutual. He was tugging on his restraints for the 60th time when a group of 3 people entered. Seeing their legs from his ground-level position, he breathed a sigh of relief. Then he looked up. Ron entered the glass-paneled meeting room, 2 CVs in black fatigues by his side, a blonde-haired man and a young black woman. Surveying the scene, he said, "Well, maybe it wasn't so bad I didn't get invited to this meeting." "This is no time for jokes, Ron," Frank Mackey growled in response. "Get us free, and we'll talk about all that." Ron motioned to the CVs. They quickly put everyone upright and loosened the constraints enough so no one's circulation was in danger, but not enough for anyone to get up or lift their arms. "Actually, Frank," Ron replied, "I think I'll have your undivided attention better this way." "Damn it, Ron," Katie Manor said. "We've got serious injuries here." "I'll keep this quick then. You came here to choose a new CEO for NoTech before you were so rudely interrupted. Let's wrap that up and get you out of here." "I hope you don't mean yourself, Ron," Frank said to sharp hushes from the other board members. He was not deterred. "You've been as knee-deep into steering NoTech into crimes and treason as Dr. Harrington. That's why you weren't invited to this meeting." Ron remained calm. "Deeper, actually. I've been the de facto CEO of this company for a while now, instigating every mission, maximizing the good the CVs have done while mitigating the harm. It's just time to make it official. So what do you say?" "Show of hands," he said to the group with their pinioned arms. Sorry, I couldn't resist." With that, one of the CVs produced a folder with documents on NoTech letterhead. "Luckily, Dr. Harrington didn't wrap up your wrists," Ron said with a chuckle. The thin, 40-ish CIO spoke up. "Ron, this is pointless. The government will never accept you as the new CEO." "You just let me worry about that, Gabe. In fact, I do have the government on my side. They just can't show it publicly yet." "Come on, Ron," Katie interjected. "Do you really want to be the new CEO? How long do you think Dr. Harrington will let you live in that role?" Ron smiled. "You know, all this concern for me would be touching if it weren't a little insulting." "Fuck you, Ron," Frank said as his colleagues gasped and Ron gave him a cold stare. Was that a little insulting? How about shove that form up your ass? I think someone is coping, Frank. It's not going to be you, because you're right. I have been involved in the missions from the start. I know how to stop Bob. Get Joel to stop him, Gabe interjected. I have a messenger on the way to him now, Ron responded cryptically before continuing. I know how to make our missions practical and profitable. In fact, I already have. And now they will be for all of us. You can join me and let me prove it. Or follow that zealot's path of destruction for us all. He has a point, Gabe said. I know what his point is, Mackie said. What he means by practical, he means working for the world's worst regimes. Frank, the side with the bigger bank account is the side that's going to win. It's just a matter of how many thousands die along the way. We're going to save lives. Why are you with him? Katie asked the CVs after a brief pause. Dr. Harrington betrayed us all, the young black woman responded. Ron can help us all. Thanks, Gabe, Ron said. And thank you, Donna, he said to the young woman. But you know, Frank's right. It's no use handing out these forms without seeing where everyone stands. Here, let's take a quick straw poll, he said, pulling out his iPhone. I've got a nifty memo pad program here on this thing. It has all your names pre-listed for easy recording. Okay, now Frank. What's your vote for me as new CEO? Frank scoffed and shook his head. No. No, it is, Ron said to the group. Now, where's your name? Ah, here it is. There was a faint buzz as Ron touched his screen, ostensibly recording Frank's vote. Frank cried out for a second, crunched wildly but futilely against his restraints, and then rolled back, dead. You killed him, Gabe cried out. I did? Ron responded with mock incredulity as he tapped on the iPhone like it had just frozen up during an Angry Birds game. Oh well. Now, who's next? Katie, here's your name. What's your vote? Secretary Romwell walked into the Oval Office as the hectic buzz of the day was finally settling. A couple of 20-something aides scurried out as Romwell approached the president. Quite a day, huh, Libby? Romwell said. It's far from over, the president replied as she looked at her laptop, then back at the pile of papers on her desk. We had our reasons for allowing safe passage of the CVs. Safe passage for them to separate. Did we contact all 30 families of the people killed today in Crystal City? She asked as she continued writing. We did, Madam President. You have the correspondence cocktail party tonight. Hopefully your staff prepared a few words. Did we establish where Dr. Harrington was going after he left New York? He's heading southwest. The president looked up. Southwest? Is he going out to Joel's Reform Center to start this all over again? Yes. My God. What's the nearest Air Force base out there? She asked as she looked back at her computer screen. Call the Joint Chiefs. I want a full squadron of F-35 sent, she said, not looking up. That won't be necessary, Madam President. President Horner froze. What the hell is that supposed to mean? She said, glaring. I already have a plan in place. I've been expecting and even hoping for this confrontation for some time now. It actually presents us with a great opportunity. What plan? It's best that you don't know the details. Horner shook. I'll be the judge of that. Now, what the hell is this plan? Several moments of silent tension were broken by a call with an urgent ringtone. Well, what do you know? The chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the president said as she reached for the receiver. Yes, I knew he'd be calling, Romwell replied. That's why I'm here. The president gave a baffled glance at the remark as she put down the receiver and put the general on speaker instead. General Lorenzo, you're on speaker with Secretary Romwell. Mr. Secretary. Hello, General. Where do we stand with the plan to bring in the remaining CVs? The president asked. Have we confirmed they've all returned to New York City? And do we have the strike teams assembled for the first group? Yes, Madam President. But I had another reason for calling. Dr. Harrington is heading to the Singer Reform Center with a group of CVs. I was about to contact you when the defense secretary reached out and said he already had a plan in place and I should take no further action. I told him I would have to confirm with you, Madam President. Thank you, General. It turns out Secretary Romwell was just about to give me a full briefing of his plan, the president said, staring at Romwell. I'll call you back when he's finished. With that, she hung up. Okay, Jack, she said calmly. You're going to tell me exactly what is going on with this plan, or I'm going ahead with mine. Your men will be told to stand down, or they will be shot down. No, Madam President. You're the one who's going to stand down. You're going to approve my plan with the Joint Chiefs without giving any details. The President scowled. I've given you too much leeway for too long. Yes, you have. Romwell replied vaguely. You're fired, effective immediately, she said, ignoring Romwell's comment. And as soon as I get more information, I'll likely have you arrested. Aaron? Jake? She said to the Secret Service agents in the corners. Escort former Secretary Romwell out of the building. Seize all his security cards and his passport if it's on his person. Romwell sat stoically in his chair as the agent stepped forward. They walked past the edge of the resolute desk and turned towards the President. What the hell are you doing? She said to the tall young man on her right. The agent and his partner responded by grabbing the President by either arm. The tall young man picked up a grapefruit-sized diamond-encrusted steel globe given to the President by the French. He squeezed the globe to the size of a golf ball, then dropped it nonchalantly on the desk with a loud thud, leaving no doubt with whom the President was dealing. You have given me too much leeway, Libby, including letting me choose your Secret Service agents for you and your family. You're making a big mistake, the President said to the CVs. But I'm going to make you a generous offer, and I'm the only person in the country who can make it. Let go of me immediately, walk out that door, and you will face no legal consequences for your actions thus far. The brown-bearded CV didn't even blink. That offer would mean more if you hadn't just been discussing plans to throw us in jail for decades, Madam President. Romwell smirked. The President glared. You're still fired, Jack. I guess you're going to have to show yourself out. Romwell smiled. If you had shown that kind of gumption earlier in your administration, it might not have come to this. What's this? A plan to usurp the presidency? Not at all. I'm happy to let you fix the unsteady bladders of geezers on Medicare. I just want to be in charge of the nation's security, for its own sake, and for more than 8 years. I can't have critical defense plans nixed by ever-changing, vacillating administrations. That's why you're going to call off the plan to arrest the CVs except for those I designate. Allow the release of Greg Chambliss, and sign off on my plan to take care of Joel and Dr. Harrington. In short, you're going to stay out of my way. Do you really think this crazy plan to co-opt the CVs is going to work? The President replied. As opposed to having them rot in jail, Madam President? The CVs are a very valuable resource. The shorter, bearded man on the President's left gave her shoulder a wince-producing squeeze. Fine. I'll do what you want. Just keep my family safe. You and your family will be the safest people in the world, Madam President, as long as you follow my instructions. After I make those calls, what do you want me to do? Romwell looked bemused. Then, you have a cocktail party to attend, Madam President. Ron looked around his new, larger office with a nod of approval, then drummed his hands on the ebony desk in victory. He thought for a moment about how soon the dust would settle, and he could bring in a new decorator. Although the FBI had already started removing a lot of Bob's decor, however roughly. His seat was still cold when he received his first phone call as CEO. Hello, Hector, Ron said, recognizing the number. Thank you for taking my call. My pleasure. First, I wanted to congratulate you on becoming our new CEO. Thank you. I just wish it were under better circumstances. Yes, of course. Was there anything else? Actually, yes. I have a couple of concerns I wanted to discuss. Why don't you come by the office then? There was a brief pause. Is that possible under the circumstances? Yes, just explain to the FBI or anyone else downstairs that you're coming to speak with me. Perhaps it was better to speak with Hector in person, even though all messages Ron sent, like the recent one for Dr. Harrington, had a self-delete option. 13 minutes later, Hector was taking a seat in front of Ron's desk in the nicest office he had ever visited. His eyes nevertheless darted nervously, as if he had just walked into a nice soft web. Relax, Hector. We're safe here. Are we working with the government then? Something like that. I told you, we had to prepare in case Dr. Harrington went down his treasonous path. Was I wrong? He said, motioning around the office. No, you called it just right. And before I get to my concerns, I wanted to thank you for the new Mercedes. It's quite beautiful. It was the least I could do. You and your research team have been doing a spectacular job. Thank you. But that's the thing I wanted to discuss. We've been delighted with the advances we've produced, which wouldn't have been possible without the files you've been providing us. And there's certainly nothing I could have done with them, Ron said with a modest smile. Hector chuckled nervously. I'm just a little concerned about some of the developments, however. Such as? Ron asked. Well, that protective device we developed for you. I'm glad you have it, but I'm not so sure we should have given it an offensive mode. Ron replied noncommittally. Anything else? It just seems like when it comes to certain projects, it's a little bit like that analogy of different members of a group all touching various parts of an elephant, and each thinking they are touching a different animal. Like someone is intentionally having you work on part of a project without knowing what's being produced in the end, Ron replied. I'm not saying that was the intent. Perhaps it was just done that way for efficiency. But in talking with some of the other scientists, it has come up as a concern. In hindsight, I have to wonder why we were asked to do those tweaks to Penivate, he said, referring to Notech's cancer drug that attacked fast-growing malignant cells by feeding them first. That poison that killed the CVs, the one that made their cells stronger first, sure seems similar. And those devices, the ones that killed the people who had held the dart guns that in turn had killed the CVs, I could see the resemblance to the device I worked on to help relieve seizures. There are others, but I think you get the point. Ron sat silently. Hector shuffled in his seat through the awkward stillness, then finally asked, May I ask what you were thinking about, Ron? I'm thinking about parking. Parking? Yes. Are you parking your car at your apartment or off-site? Off-site, just down the block. It's no problem. Maybe not, but I didn't get you a free car just so you could have a parking bill as large as the car payment would have been. I'm going to call and make sure the parking is billed to Notech. Thank you, that's very generous. Not at all. And I want to arrange on-site parking. I wouldn't want Carla and little Jorge getting wet unnecessarily. You know the names of my wife and son? Of course, I'm not a robot. I do try to take an interest in the lives of my key employees. I'll get that on-site parking going ASAP. Although I know Carla and Jorge like to walk down to Louie's ice cream shop right next to the current garage. Just like they did this past Thursday at 4 p.m.? Hector sat frozen. You referred to us having concerns just now, Ron said calmly. Who else had concerns? I would certainly want to get in touch with them and see if we could ameliorate those worries, Ron said brightly as he pulled out a pad and a Waterford pen. No one, Hector replied after a pause. No one at all. Okay then. Did you have any other concerns I could address? No, definitely not. I think I'll just get going. Suit yourself. I'm sorry we had such a short meeting, Ron said as he stood up to walk Hector out. Putting an arm around him, Ron said, You know, we have to get you on the board. It's absurd that Notech's chief science officer doesn't have a spot on it already. I hope you don't mind I didn't push to get you on the board while Bob was CEO, but trust me, it wouldn't have been pleasant. Joel pulled the El Camino into Oops Diner, so named because of the adjacent garage and gas station that frequently towed in cars that had failed to realize they were more than an hour from the nearest gas station as they drove through the vast Sonoma Desert. Not another building in sight. Joel and Tina walked into the white stucco restaurant. They entered to see cheap wood paneling and a buffet stand surrounded by peeling green formica. But it was complemented by a decadent mixture of lasagna, roast beef, mesquite barbecue, and other favorites. Will it be all-you-can-eat buffet for you two? The pleasantly plump hostess asked. Yes, but he'll pay double, Tina said, motioning towards Joel. Oh, that's not... Trust me, Tina interjected, thrusting $30 into the hostess's hand for the two $10 specials. 30 minutes later, Joel was sitting behind 4 stacks of 5 plates, each all but licked clean. I thought you took in nutrients through the air and sunlight in Washington, Tina said, motioning toward the plates. Joel looked around for a moment to make sure no one was listening. I did, but it was like trying to drain a pool with a teaspoon. As much as I can adapt, feeding that way will never feel natural. Tina smiled. Did it taste better than the food at the Reform Center cafeteria, though? Well, I bypassed my taste buds altogether. Do you think the guys at the center wish they could do the same? Tina gave a sad smile. I hope you did the same thing with your pain receptors or whatever. Bypass them, I mean. Joel nodded. You know, I can use other methods for detecting when I'm injured, but none have quite the same sense of urgency. God, so you felt all that pain when they were tearing you up? When they smashed you into pieces? At least I lived to tell about it. I guess I'm the only person in the world who could. Still, I don't blame you for wanting a nice relaxing meal after that. That isn't why I brought you here, as soon as I got back to the Reform Center. Why then? I wanted one more meal before the attack. Before I had to get you out of here. What attack? Tina asked. Joel cleared his throat. Dr. Harrington is on his way here with 50 CVs. He's planning on killing Larry Harding. Tina sat stunned. Are you sure? She finally asked. Yes. I can sense them from here. Well, can't you stop them from here? Can't you do that quantum stuff you did back in Washington? No. Those quantum connections are very tenuous. They're easily broken by someone with similar abilities. But Dr. Harrington couldn't block you before. That's the other thing that happened in Washington. He became more powerful, gained new abilities from you, Tina surmised. Yes. Is he as powerful as you, then? Joel shrugged. He wouldn't need to be, to block quantum signals from a distance. In any case, he can't attack us from a distance either. Are you sure? Yes, I think he realized I could stop any remote attack from him, too. Oh, he didn't even try, you mean? No, he did. He tried to kill Larry about an hour ago from across the country. But why would he try if he knew it wouldn't work? I mean, Tina hesitated for a moment. Oh, if he knew you could stop a remote attack, maybe you would assume he wouldn't try to attack remotely, and he could catch you not paying attention. Joel smiled. Sometimes the simplest mistakes are the easiest to make, he said, not unkindly. Why is he doing this? Because you stopped him in Washington? I'm sure that didn't help, but no. Larry kidnapped Dr. Harrington's daughter. Tina was aghast. I can't believe Larry would do that. Or if he did, he was threatened or something like that. Exactly like that. Larry's own daughter was kidnapped. Tell Dr. Harrington. I did. We're able to communicate telepathically now. But he's coming anyway? He is. Joel explained Dr. Harrington's anger with Larry's failure to contact the police. Joel or himself. It's hard to blame him in a way. Maybe I'd go a little crazy too if someone I loved was harmed, Joel said, his eyes turning away from Tina for a moment. Tina grabbed his arm. Joel, you can't let that make you hesitate, not for a second. I mean, what if your father slept with some guy's wife, and the husband came after his whole family, including you, for revenge? His having a legit gripe would be irrelevant. Of course, I'm going to do whatever it takes to stop him. There's no stopping him. There's no capturing him. Not if he's anything like you now. You have to kill him. It may very well come to that. It has come to that. You have to kill him as quickly as possible. That's what he's going to do to you. The waitress came by with a check, which Joel grabbed and quickly took to the register. A few moments later, they walked outside, where a cab was kicking up dust with its exhaust in the bright sunlight. Is that for me? Tina asked. Yes. He's going to take you to the Las Vegas airport. What about everyone else? Joel shook his head. I don't have the authority to send them anywhere else. Even if I did, Dr. Harrington might follow them there. The cab driver beeped in annoyance. You better go. Tina turned toward the cab, but turned back 3 steps later. Joel, don't let him kill you, she said, her eyes welling up. Joel swallowed hard. I won't make it easy on him, I promise. But hey, death is an essential part of life. The body would soon cease to function if individual cells weren't programmed to die when they became unhealthy. The lenses of our eyes are formed because cells die to become transparent, and— Shut up. Just shut up, Tina said, putting her head on Joel's chest as she cried. Okay. I better go, Tina, Joel said after a minute or so. She began to pull away and walk toward the cab. Tina? She turned back around. I just want you to know if we don't see each other again, that Yes? That I know you'll be okay. You're smart and strong, and I know you'll be okay. She replied with a joyless, "Thank you," and got in the cab. Joel turned back to the El Camino and drove towards the Reform Center. Joel stood silently half a mile in front of the Reform Center, the wind swirling the dust lightly around his feet. Dr. Harrington was still 100 miles away, but Joel could already hear the sand hitting the indentations of his fingerprints. He looked back now at the Reform Center, placid and unassuming. Below it now were the world's largest gears, a dozen gargantuan wheels 2,500 feet in diameter and 30 feet thick. He thought back for a minute on his converting sand into iron as protons and electrons were ripped apart, then reconfigured and smashed together again, the satisfying ache of carrying thousands of tons in his hands, as an oblivious world stood above. He fired a signal from his brain and the earth began to move. The gigantic gears groaned upward, a mountain of dirt pouring off their sides. Simultaneously, the entire mile-wide Reform Center complex began to sink downward onto an unseen platform. The gears converged over their hidden charge, covered now under humongous, fully merged steel plates. Joel turned back to the oncoming assault, presently about 40 miles away. The 50 CVs were in front. Dr. Harrington's pride might have told him to take on his old protege alone, but the analytical mind of a scientist had obviously caused an override. Demetrius had been on target with his jibe. Joel had yet to defeat them for all his power. But it was different this time. And time was what was different. This was the first instance where he was given any chance to prepare, and his power was not measured by how much information he could control at any given time, but rather how much information he could control over a period of time. More time quite literally multiplied his power the way an old lady could lift a multi-ton car, using the incremental cranks of a jack over minutes, enabling what would be impossible in one fell swoop. Joel raised his hands and the ground began to buzz. He didn't bother lifting his head to see the group, now 10 miles away. Instead, it was the ground itself that heaved upward like 100 giant sand geysers, erupting simultaneously. The CVs were unperturbed as ever, as Dr. Harrington pushed them at near supersonic speed into the maelstrom. It was not there anymore. The wall of sand coalesced and diffused, thinning into a massive square plate the size of a city block. Once completed, the sheer wall lurched violently forward, the air hissing through its tiny holes as it accelerated. In the blink of an eye, the wall and the CVs collided at over 1,000 miles an hour. Some almost reached the edges while others made frantic, futile attempts to strike the wall before contact. There were no crunching sounds, no grotesque splatters, but rather a silent chorus of pinpoint lights that flickered as the rows of CVs were converted into pure energy, hitting the wall and disappearing within 1/10 of a second. It was another half-second before the wall reached Dr. Harrington 100 yards behind. A ray of light shot from Dr. Harrington's hand as the huge wall was on him. Luminescence filtered through the behemoth as it glowed for a moment, then shattered with a thunderous crack. Thousands of shards were still falling to earth as Dr. Harrington shot through the debris. As he slowed his descent with waves of kinetic energy from one hand, waves from another caused the sand to leap up again. This time the sand clumped together immediately, rising to a height of about 100 feet with a width of 50 feet. The conglomeration pulsed and crackled with electricity as the sand twisted and shifted. Within 10 seconds, it took on a monstrous shape. A creature now stood on the scarred earth. Perhaps Tim should have gotten the hint after dodging deadly debris down in Washington just a couple of days earlier and taken a hard pass when he got a tip that round 2 of the battle between Joel and Dr. Harrington and his CVs was about to take place out in the Nevada desert. But he did not. And after flying out to Las Vegas, he'd gotten a local helicopter pilot to fly him out to the Reform Center. They arrived just as some kind of enormous glass wall exploded. They flew closer to the impending battle, about 300 yards behind Joel, and sat, awed at what they saw. A huge golem covered with thick armor riddled with spikes, with 4 thick, slimy legs, 12 arms, and 4 long, armored reptilian heads. The muscular arms ended with sedan-sized maws resembling Venus flytraps. They were each adorned with huge claws over a group of large, tightly coiled cables. The cables in the center jutted out prominently. Tim could hear them crackling with electricity from his 1,000-foot distance. Towering over Joel, the golem launched its arms and heads at him with vicious speed, swinging its massive claws from all directions, gnashing him with jaws, all while firing searing bolts. It looked as though the volley had pulverized Joel, as only small floating particles remained where the young man had stood. So he truly had been leapfrogged by his mentor. Tim zoomed in with his camera, trying to identify even small body parts. He saw only swirling, glowing bits, and then realized it had been an empty shell. A blob shot from the ground, instantly reconstituting itself into Joel's human form, a softball-sized, glowing ball in the young man's left hand. He threw it at the middle of the monster, where it erupted instantly. The monster was incinerated, as a blinding explosion birthed a suffocating heat that filled Tim's nostrils. A shockwave from the blast pushed the helicopter backward. The monster burst into 1,000 smaller versions of itself, ready to attack. They were obliterated, too, as the explosion lingered, as if prognosticating the doppelganger miniatures. The glowing ball instantly reformed, whipping up and out toward a still falling Dr. Harrington. Stunned for a moment by his setback, he was caught squarely in the chest, the ball thrusting him at supersonic speed into the craggy cliffs that abutted the Reform Center a mile to the east. Dr. Harrington's brief tenure with superhuman abilities hadn't gained him victory. Hell, he never even got his feet on the ground. Jose looked around at his fellow CVs. They looked as bewildered as he felt. It was as though he had just snapped out of a dream and back into consciousness, although he had just been flying wide awake over the Nevada desert a second ago. Maybe I've just been thrown a few hundred feet away, the CV thought, as he looked down on rocky ground. Looking up, he was hit with a much different impression. There was the semblance of a plexiglass dome over an oval-shaped surface about 200 feet from front to back and 300 feet wide. Cool, damp air flowed from a series of small circular openings. There was a ruckus at the edge of the dome. He checked it out. On the other side of the dome was nothing. Staring down, he saw a scraggly but not barren landscape, dotted with evergreens, and farther away, isolated acres of prairie land. Neither would have been found near Joel's Reform Center. The nearest land looked 1,000 feet away, and there appeared no connection between their rocky platform and the surrounding terrain, as if Joel had sent them floating above this isolated area. Jose's pondering was interrupted by a punctuated realization from one of his female counterparts. "Congratulations, guys. We've made it to the top of Devil's Tower." Jose smirked. A 1,200-foot vertical tower made of volcanic basalt stone, tougher than granite, in northeastern Wyoming. Definitely not a spot Joel had thought of at the last second. He couldn't have imagined that this dome had been up for any significant period of time, however. They were standing at the top of the country's first national landmark, one that didn't go a day without climbers ascending it. "The strap wasn't here 5 minutes ago, but it was still waiting for us long before that," someone else said, echoing his thoughts. A couple of CVs kicked and punched at the dome, but it was futile, even for them. Someone gave an excited shout. "I found some softer rock here," she said as Jose turned to see the CV kicking big chunks out of the rocky ground. "Maybe we can angle our way out of here." The excitement drained from her face a moment later. Jose walked over and poked his head through a gathering crowd. Beneath him was a coffin-sized container filled with MREs, protein bars, bottled water, and other sustenance that was more functional than appetizing. There were also magazines to pass the time as they waited for their wholly unexpected rescue. He looked down to see a Time magazine with the cover, "Can the CVs be stopped?" as its headline. Touché, Joel. Seeing his cohorts kick at other spots on the ground, Jose realized all but the areas above the containers were covered with a synthetic shell, even tougher than the basalt stone. "Come on, let's kick our way out of here and charter a flight back," a beefy colleague a few feet away said. "No," Jose replied to a respectfully attentive group. "Grab a magazine and a protein bar, guys. This is Dr. Harrington's fight now." Joel had not killed Dr. Harrington, as he had hoped not to do. Instead, he felt the air move a fraction of an angstrom, as Dr. Harrington moved his head toward the Reform Center from within the cliff. Joel instinctively turned toward the center, pondering for a second if Dr. Harrington was somehow going to tunnel there. He jerked his head back to see Dr. Harrington, standing by the hole in the cliff a mile away, his hand outstretched. He stood poised for what Dr. Harrington was about to send his way. He had already sent it. The air rippled and converged around an unseen point that streaked toward him. Its acceleration increased exponentially each nanosecond. Joel noticed too late. It was a single molecule of sand coming toward him. It was rising at a slight angle as it was approaching the speed of light, close enough that its momentum made it effectively weigh over 20 million tons when the molecule hit him and was obliterated. Its mass converted instantly into kinetic energy. Joel was vaulted backward and upward as he focused on offsetting the incredible force trying to tear his body asunder. A sonic boom sounded. The giant gears above the Reform Center were specks below, and Joel was surrounded by absolute nothingness. But he knew exactly how far above the earth he was. The temperature had suddenly warmed to a relatively balmy 29.6 degrees, from 180 degrees colder as he hit the tropopause, the layer of atmospheric equilibrium 18 miles above the Earth. Streaking upward at over Mach 3 toward the utter oblivion of outer space, devoid of any replenishing nutrients, being pounded by kinetic waves of energy by Dr. Harrington, Joel found his life force fading. He looked up at the eternal night above, seeing the stars. He felt a glimmer of hope. Dr. Harrington stood in the desert, serene but intent, a column of vibrating waves shooting out of his outstretched hand toward a target seen only by himself. He knew Joel must be on the border of the vacuum of space, and allowed himself a glance over at the gears covering the Reform Center. He felt Larry there, along with the 2,000 other inmates. Every second out here, he risked his life further. He who had saved millions and would save millions more. Should he risk that life for these criminals? He reached out with his mind. The staff had been separated, but Larry was hard to pinpoint. How much simpler to collapse the roof on the inmates under untold tons of earth. The 0% recidivism rate moving forward would be a tidy extra bonus. Larry's crime could be the only blemish on Joel's otherwise perfect record of which he was so proud. He pressed, his mind pushing through the thick steel plates, trying to reach the roof. For a few interminable seconds he felt nothing. Then the slightest dip. Infinitesimal cracks. He looked back to an odd sight his side vision had caught. A light, perhaps 6 inches in diameter, appeared on his blue polo shirt, visible even in the still bright sun of the late afternoon. He stood puzzled for a moment at the mysterious light, when in an instant Joel was there, grabbing him by the shoulders, thrusting him headfirst down into the hard-packed earth. The ground erupted with the reverberations. Joel had become a ray of pure energy, invariably traveling at the speed of light, immune to pushing or pulling. Dr. Harrington rose from the Sherman tank-sized crater, landing a punch to Joel's gut that released a massive shockwave, one that sent shards of the nearby cliff outward. The battle continued, with both men using a mixture of conscious thought and intuition to push each other to ever greater heights. Swings met with only vapor, then crashed into supercompressed diamond. Fists exploded like an erupting fuel tanker and burned with hydrochloric acid. Dr. Harrington was a giant ape, a T-Rex, a tiger. Bodies were shredded and instantly reformed. No matter how dense Dr. Harrington made himself, Joel punched, bit, or burned through. When he made himself insubstantial, he risked deadly diffusion, as Joel poured in energy to speed up his molecules. Battling for over an hour, taking countless forms in whole and part, creating a crater the size of an amphitheater, the two men found themselves in a maddening stalemate, until the two most advanced beings the world had ever known became two naked, sweaty, brawling savages. He had lost. What was he thinking? Taking on an entity of which at best he hoped to become a fair facsimile. Jerry-rigging his old, dilapidated body to match one built from the ground up without limitation. In a few moments he'd fail to hide his exhaustion, his fading lucidity, and be unable to regenerate. And then he felt Joel fading too. Reinvigorated, Dr. Harrington hit Joel with a flurry of fists at blinding speed. But of course he was going to win. Did this fool he had made an error really think he wouldn't make himself greater by design, with the benefit of hindsight? Joel put up his hands to block the blows half-heartedly, and then not at all. The younger man's arms dangled by his sides, his nose mangled and eye socket collapsed. Dr. Harrington lifted him up by the throat and cocked his fist, pumping energy into it for a killing blow. His right arm pulsed and bulged as he prepared to fry Joel back into primordial soup. But not yet. Speaking for the first time in hours, he said, "And so it ends, for the most powerful being in the universe. We could have been so great together, accomplished so much, made this world a better place. Instead, you wanted to wallow with swine, coddle criminals, and only got the balls up to fight so you could oppose your creator. After all this time, I realize I had it right about you with my first words. You are a mistake." Dr. Harrington felt a twinge of disappointment that it was going to end this way. This magnificent creature turned into a helpless, haggard sop as it awaited its death. "Come on, kid. At least raise your arms. Take one more shot before you die. What are you doing?" Barely audible, through split, bleeding lips, Joel replied, "I'm focusing." Dr. Harrington felt what he meant before he understood it. An irresistible force shoved him back, breaking his grip on Joel. An instant later, he crashed into a translucent wall behind him. He gathered himself for a moment to find he was trapped in a triangular cell. He looked out through amber-tinted walls at Joel. Sending an electric pulse, he found the walls to be exponentially stronger and denser than any natural substance. A now healthy Joel stood with an outstretched arm, reinforcing it with plasma that shot out from his arm, instantly cooling on the exterior of the chamber like magma. He spoke. Dr. Harrington could hear him clearly. "This chamber will only allow wavelengths from the visual and audible spectrums to pass both ways. I'm going to heat this chamber to over 5,000 degrees. Too hot for complex molecules or energy fields to remain stable. You will not survive." Joel saw Dr. Harrington's face turn from frustrated to panicked as he spoke. "I'm sorry it has come to this. I wish there was another way." Dr. Harrington was now pounding, kicking, and blasting at the wall of the cell, which only made it heat up faster. "I'll do my best to continue the good work you've done and to punish those who have turned us against each other. Joel found himself transported, his mind flooded by an uninvited vision. He was standing in a magnificent parlor, resplendent with marble and Persian rugs, a multi-tiered fountain behind him. It could have been the lobby of a 5-star hotel, but Joel knew, as one just knows these things in dreams, that he was standing in his own house. He stood there in a finely tailored navy blue suit with Tina, perhaps a couple of years older, more casually dressed aside from the 5-carat Tiffany diamond necklace she wore. The potentially lovely scene was marred by the staccato roar from a phalanx of hovering helicopters. More obtrusive was the blaring of a speaker with a repetitive voice. "Come out and place yourself in the containment chamber. You are under arrest. You have 2 minutes." This ever-decreasing number was the only aspect of the announcement that changed. The disturbing sounds were mixed with powerful spotlights from the ground and mounted on helicopters. It was as though their naked lenses were pasted on the 10-foot mahogany-framed windows from top to bottom. So glaring were the lights. "You should go, Joel," Tina said, her back to the window. "Maybe we can still work this out." "Work this out?" Joel replied tersely. "By allowing myself to be arrested. That is to be my thanks for all but ending war, hunger, and crime?" "At what cost, though?" Tina asked. "Declaring yourself emperor of the world? It's not the will of the people, Joel." Joel scoffed, looking back briefly as he walked outside. "Who needs the will of the people when you have the will of God?" He strode onto a magnificent marble portico built onto the edge of his gigantic palace, which in turn was carved out of the regal Rocky Mountains, 10,000 feet above sea level. He looked up at the armada of helicopters and Harrier jets, then 100 feet down onto the rocky but large and level clearing, filled with dozens of tanks and hundreds of troops. An array of spotlights were turned on him as a loudspeaker blared. "Step into the containment chamber." Joel looked down to see a contraption much like the one from CIA headquarters, albeit larger. Joel did not move toward the chamber. Instead, he stood calmly and raised his head. Then, in a voice that somehow drowned out the deafening din, said, "En ahi, in ho logos, ke ho logos, in theos." As he spoke the cryptic words, he opened his palm to reveal a seed. He threw it casually out onto the clearing. It landed over 100 yards into the center of the forces. Time was up. A second later, a hellish barrage was unleashed that seemed enough to melt the 14,000-foot mountain. Never mind one man standing on his porch. Joel was bathed in blinding light from the bullets, rockets, and shells that poured down and streaked upward. A couple seconds after the attack began, its focal point, initially a shapeless, glowing mass, took on a discernible but shifting shape. It was a laughing, mocking face. The attack stopped for a few moments, revealing through the smoke a smirking and very much alive Joel. A tree rocketed upward out of the ground to a height of 20 feet, a bushy tree with a wide canopy, a mustard tree. It began to glow with a soft, warm light as curious soldiers converged, then exploded in a blast that vaporized everything in sight and miles beyond, including all his attackers, sparing only his palace. Actually, the explosion spared only his palace and something now making a droning sound that Joel couldn't see. It sounded light, unshielded, the last thing that would have survived the blast. Joel was snapped back to reality, and saw now that only about 5 seconds had passed during his vision. Dr. Harrington was still encased. Looking up, Joel saw the onomatopoeically named drone, looking no bigger than a model plane. It was only about a quarter of a mile away. White doors opened on its bottom, and out came a shoebox-sized device with a light that began to blink. Joel realized instantly, and horrifically, what it was. He leapt. Dr. Harrington saw the blank eyes on Joel for a couple of seconds as he reinforced his cell, then saw him look up. He turned and saw Joel leap, breaking free of his trap. Dr. Harrington saw the young man bringing far more to bear than his own body on the device up in the sky. Even as Joel flew towards the drone, the hard-packed earth began to rise, acre after acre and layer after layer, a good 20 feet deep. The cliffs of the Sierra Nevadas had their faces shorn, yanked into a gravity well of Joel's creation, with the young man at the epicenter. The innumerable tons of boulders and sand joined with the ambient particles in the air to all but block out the sun as the massive conglomeration simultaneously rushed toward the box while converging on Joel. Reaching the box, Joel hugged the device, wrapping his arms around, then melting onto it, becoming a black, spherical shell. The heterogeneous mix of stone, sand, and debris collapsed onto the sphere, becoming a dense, uniform layer of undifferentiated mass onto which a thick layer of ice instantly formed. The weight of a mountain was squeezed into a sphere the size of an earth ball. For a fraction of a second, the sphere bulged but held. Then it did not. Dr. Harrington reacted immediately to the explosion, making an agonizing choice in a millisecond. The explosion filled Dr. Harrington's entire field of vision, covering thousands of square miles in an instant. Behind him was Las Vegas. In front of him were the thousands of people he had sent to their deaths. He put up his hands, generating a half-dome-shaped force field that stopped inches in front of him but traversed over 100 miles behind him and soared as high as a skyscraper. It would never have held were it not for a vortex that Dr. Harrington simultaneously created above his head, siphoning off all possible energy from the explosion into a blinding, fiery column that was funneled into his body. He began to glow, such that he quickly could not distinguish where he separated from the pillar of energy. His cells waged war with the energy, smothering, canceling out enough volts to power a small city a night with each excruciating second, only to be flooded with more. Even as the flow ebbed, he felt his sinews go slack, his skin slough. His mitochondria burst, and he knew no more. My pilot made the right call, clearing out to Vegas 100 miles to the west, Tim thought to himself as a force field slashed across the sky. They flew down to about 50 feet above ground level to get a better perspective, but the view was largely the same. A uniform, blinding light from a blast that for all they knew could have encompassed the entire world, not just Las Vegas. The city looked like it was under a giant snow globe, with Armageddon on the other side. They saw a few lightning rods melt as they squinted and felt the AC in the helicopter kick into another gear, but the force field held. 5 minutes of sitting there, dumbfounded, later. The sky cleared and the din faded. What Tim knew they should do was land the chopper, check the news reports, book a hotel, verify, then verify again it was safe to leave the city. It would be rash, imprudent, reckless, and insane for them to leave and chase down the certainly dead Joel and Dr. Harrington. They lifted off and headed for the Reform Center. The man walked into the town of Caliente, Nevada. Population formerly 1,123, now population 0. He had just passed Kershaw-Ryan State Park, with its campgrounds, horseshoe pits, and a picturesque swimming pool, or at least they had been 2 hours ago. The water from the pool had boiled instantly, with over 20 children and watchful adults cooked to skinless, beet-red flesh before the water vaporized. Piles of ash stood in the spots where folks had been standing for a carefree volleyball game. One near the remnants of a net looked as though it could have been a boy whose greatest care at the time of the explosion was impressing a pretty girl with a spike. Coming to the downtown area, the man came upon the black skeleton of what used to be the white stucco old train station, with its red corrugated roof. The building had served as the town's city hall, art gallery, and library. A well-preserved couple stood just off the curb. They used to be a mother escorting her daughter across the street. The mother still held her daughter's hand protectively, her head turned warily despite the town's light traffic. The man approached the couple and embraced them, falling to one knee. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," he whispered, as the desert sun gave stark relief to his moist, trembling arms juxtaposed on silent, obsidian bodies. They crumbled over his arms, ashes falling lightly onto the dusty street. The helicopter reached the Reform Center safely, the edifice now again visible below. Less prominent but still trackable in the arid, pulverized landscape were footsteps. 20 minutes later, they came upon a man surrounded by utter devastation, his arms seemingly embracing a thick smattering of ash that covered them. The man looked up with piqued annoyance at the sound of the helicopter. They saw Joel Singer. Ron walked into Tavern on the Green, Central Park's landmark restaurant, under a multitude of large glass chandeliers, surrounded by gilded mirrors and a host of bouquets that were spread throughout the restaurant. Francesca walked behind him to a reserved window table, one of the few that offered some privacy. She hoped the lunch wouldn't take long. She was waiting to get a report from her 2 assigned CVs who had just paid visits to the ex-boyfriends of Maria and Katie, 2 women she had befriended at area women's shelters. "Lovely, isn't it?" Ron said. "I'd say more like a garish, overwrought tourist trap." "Maybe so, but also under new management. So forgive me if I feel a certain kinship," Ron said, referring to the restaurant's relaunch out of bankruptcy. "Not exactly the best place to lay low in any case," Francesca said, referring to the news that Joel had been spotted alive and well. "Joel won't be materializing by the dessert tray. I've taken steps," Ron said with a wave. He was referring to the advanced jamming device he was now employing to prevent Joel from teleporting to him or using his abilities from a distance, an explanation he showed no inclination to expound upon to Francesca. "How are you supposed to keep tabs on him, though, with one of Dr. Harrington's DNA tracking devices? Not very handy on a man who can change his DNA." "Exactly." Francesca understood. "You've updated the trackers to detect the one person who can change his DNA." Ron nodded. We have a tracker attached to an explosive device on a very fast drone discreetly hidden in the Nevada desert. One that can keep up with a man who changes his DNA to move at superhuman speed. Francesca pondered for a minute. You only have one device left. You need a direct hit, the kind you can only get with Joel out in the open, moving towards you. Plus, we were able to pin the first explosion on Dr. Harrington. But another one right in the same area, that's pushing it, Ron said. You already have the pseudo-scientific explanation ready, don't you? How an angry Joel coming at you with super speed caused another explosion. It does seem kind of dangerous, doesn't it? Is he coming anyway? That's the question Joel has to ponder. The question that will keep him cautious. The question that buys us some time. Francesca shook her head, exasperated but unable to suppress the hint of a smile. You love me, Ron said. Oh, speaking of which, Dr. Harrington hasn't been declared dead yet, but I'm going to need you to play the part of grieving girlfriend at his funeral. Who says I'll be playing a part? Who says I wouldn't have saved him if you had told me your plans? Even better then, Ron said. Always mix a little truth with your lies. Lennon, Francesca responded. Very good. So where's the truth in your lies? Francesca asked. Ron chuckled lightly. The truth is, Dr. Harrington has been killed and the world is a better place for it. If it took lies, so be it. You know, the good doctor may have considered himself the world's preeminent scholar on evolution, but I've done a little study in that area myself. We aren't the only animals that use tools. A chimp will use a reed to retrieve ants from inside a log. A gull will drop an oyster on the rock to break its shell. We aren't alone with language. A gorilla can learn to sign as many as 500 words. But no one can make shit up out of whole cloth the way we can. And that's no coincidence. When our ancestors found themselves forced out onto the plains, they needed to form large groups to survive against stronger, fiercer animals. Leaders had to emerge without constantly killing each other. Males had to give themselves a chance to mate when a large group meant the presence of a larger alpha male was all but inevitable. And that meant being more clever if you weren't more powerful. It meant brains over brawn. It meant lies, Francesca said. Yes, an arms race of deception and detecting deception, with mounting complexity, making for bigger brains, especially the neocortex, responsible for abstract thinking, Ron said, pointing to the top of his head, where the difference in brain size between us and other species is especially pronounced. So, it was lies that made us human, and it was lies that today helped save humanity from a terrible scourge. So be it. And Joel? Joel is the last piece of collateral damage that should have been left out in the desert. Now come on, hurry up and order. I've got to get back to my CEO duties. Would you believe a generic company has already filed to invalidate the patent on our latest cancer drug? I'm pleased to say I now have an expanded repertoire of methods with which to discourage our rival. I'm guessing you don't mean you're going to bribe him with a t-shirt from this place. Tina drove through the open desert to the Reform Center. She had not heard from Joel in the week since she had left him at the diner, but reports were he had survived and gone back to the facility. The government was still deciding what to do with him, a fact Tina appreciated when her last paycheck arrived and her corporate credit card went through to pay for her flight back to Las Vegas. As she approached, she had to go through a battery of dozens of law enforcement vehicles, investigating the recent battle and its ramifications. Still, her ID was still valid and eventually got her through. Making her way to Joel's office, adjacent to her own, she found a locked door. She knocked. She was taken aback to see a striking young woman with chestnut hair open the door. Tina gave a tepid hello, reflecting her vague recollection of the woman. "Hello, I'm Jessica Harrington," she said. Somewhat stunned, Tina nonetheless replied, "Oh, I'm sorry for your loss." Jessica thanked her graciously. Joel now came from the back of the office and embraced her warmly. He did not seem put off by the situation. If anything, he seemed more relaxed and confident than ever, as if his victory over Dr. Harrington had given him a certain serenity. "Jessica was nice enough to fly out during this tough time," Joel said. "As Dr. Harrington's daughter and sole heir, She will retain primary ownership over Notech, despite my new appointment." "What appointment?" Joel and Jessica looked at one another. "Tina, I've been appointed the new CEO of Notech." Tina felt a mixture of shock and pity well up within her, all the more seeing Joel's smile. "Joel, I'm sorry, but Ron Guerin is the new Notech CEO." "I know," Joel replied. "It's illegitimate." "It was in the news. The board approved it." "That's a long story. Suffice it to say for now that approval was made under duress. Dr. Harrington controlled Notech. It was a private company, and his will states that I was to become CEO upon his death." Tina couldn't resist her next question, despite Jessica's presence. "It's a little ironic that he would choose you as his successor, isn't it? You didn't get along so well at the end." "We were just discussing that," Joel replied, motioning toward Jessica. "Actually, we worked together at the very end to save the lives we could." "But CEO? You've never been a CEO, or anything like it." Jessica interjected. "He's run this reform center with a staff of over 200, more than most companies. Moreover, no one's more committed to helping the ill, or inventing treatments for them. He'll have plenty of help with day-to-day management." "And has the government approved all this? You as CEO? The reform center staying open?" "We're working on that, although they have been pretty distracted by recent events." Tina saw an opening to lighten the mood with her presence. "Anyway, here's a little gift from back home. A roast beef sandwich from the side door with extra mustard. Just the way you like it." Joel allowed for the levity. He smiled and took the sandwich. "Great, thanks," he said. He glanced at it. "Tina, there's no mustard on this." Tina felt the color draining from her face. "You're not Joel," she croaked. Joel stood baffled. "I'm not Joel because there's no mustard on my sandwich?" he asked with more than a hint of sarcasm. "You haven't been talking like Joel, and Joel hates mustard on his sandwiches." "I know, Dad, come on. She deserves to know." With a deep sigh, Joel's shape began to shift, de-differentiating into an amorphous blob before congealing into Dr. Harrington in a golf shirt and slacks. "I'm sorry, Tina," he said simply. "I don't care about apologies. I just want to know where Joel is." Dr. Harrington nodded somberly. "About that, I'm even more sorry. I don't want to crush your hopes, but I don't want to give you false ones either. Joel is dead." "You're wrong," she replied sternly, holding back tears. "Joel was unkillable. He could survive anything." "I wish that were true," Dr. Harrington replied. "How can you be so sure?" He walked back to Joel's desk and sat. "Einstein once said, we should explain science as simply as possible, but no simpler. In that spirit, let me apologize in advance if my answer confuses you. Joel was not a creature of magic or myth. He was a creature of science, and everything in science has its limits. Limits I foolishly and inadvertently helped to reveal to our enemies. Joel had become extremely good at manipulating waves, or using energy efficiently, if you will, to accomplish a given goal. But when it came to explosions, or in his case, offsetting one, there was something more efficient." "That's not true," Tina said. "Joel told me once he could survive a nuclear explosion." "I don't doubt it," Dr. Harrington replied. "The atom bomb that exploded over Hiroshima, the most efficient release of energy ever at the time." "I guess that's one way of putting it," Jessica interjected, rolling her eyes. "Still used under 1% of the available energy," Dr. Harrington continued. "I doubt that even today nuclear bombs could create an explosion Joel couldn't handle." "But," Tina began. "There is something more efficient than Joel when it comes to destructive power. In fact, it explodes with 100% efficiency." "Antimatter," Jessica said. "Exactly." "They produced an antimatter bomb without you knowing?" Jessica asked. "They didn't produce it. They made antimatter appear." "You mean something as large and complex as an antimatter bomb from some other planet or something? I'm not sure even Joel could do that." "Very good, Tina," Dr. Harrington replied with all the reassurance he could muster. "They didn't make an antimatter bomb appear. just antimatter itself, and not a huge chunk of antimatter all at once, so much as they manifested separate little bits of antimatter simultaneously. Technology they largely stole by studying Joel's actions in Washington, I'm afraid. Okay, but still, what good is raw antimatter? Tina asked. Doesn't it have to be put into a bomb? No. In fact, building an antimatter bomb presents a unique challenge. You see, not only does antimatter explode with 100% efficiency, it also explodes the instant it touches matter. That makes it pretty tough to find, never mind drum up or store. But that same quality means you don't need to make a bomb out of it, Jessica said. Just make it appear and the detonation happens. Precisely. How did they get it from way out there to here? Tina asked. Even though the particles of antimatter are in the traditional sense usually very far away, they are also in a sense already here, Dr. Harrington said. He went on to explain the nature of non-locality at the quantum level. They signaled the antimatter atoms probability waves to collapse, causing decoherence and instant physical manifestation. Dr. Harrington continued. Our enemies were able to take the next step, the one only Joel and I had taken. They made the antimatter atoms appear here, the probability waves to collapse in a directed, non-random fashion. But how did they know how many atoms they needed? Tina asked. By stealing from me, Dr. Harrington replied. He reviewed the discovery that the maximum amount of information a black hole, and by extension any object, can contain, is based on its surface area. This information, vis-a-vis Joel's brain, was surreptitiously recorded by me, along with a thorough analysis of all his vital statistics. More than enough data to roughly calculate how much information Joel could control at one time. It had to be a pretty big number, Tina said. It was. Thus the need for the antimatter. And not just that, Jessica surmised. It's why they needed him distracted, why they could only give him seconds to react. Yes, his power multiplies given more time. But how could an explosion kill Joel? He could become pure energy. That wouldn't save him, Dr. Harrington replied. After all, we are all pure energy. Matter just being one form of it. We still aren't sure why some forms of energy take on mass and become matter. The leading theory is that it has something to do with an interaction with the cosmic background radiation, and more recently the Higgs boson. Dad. Yes, I digress. You see, Joel couldn't become a big ball of random energy, but rather had to remain an ordered, low-entropy energy field. A low-entropy energy field? Dr. Harrington went on to explain the concept to Tina, much as he and Joel had discussed. But why did he throw his body at the bomb? Why not absorb what he could from a distance using anything but his own body? Because Joel understood what kind of weapon they were throwing at him, and that he can control his own body best. He sacrificed himself without hesitation, just as Ron figured he would. So they used his compassion against him? Sadly, yes. I suppose they didn't count on yours, then, Tina asked. Dr. Harrington smirked. That little dig is the least I deserve. No, as best as I can figure. They weren't sure what to make of me. They certainly hoped the bomb would kill me too, but they didn't have a thorough analysis of me. For all they knew, I would teleport to the moon when I saw the bomb. No, the bomb had enough to kill Joel plus a little extra. 10,000 people extra, Dad. I can assure you there would have been more if I hadn't gotten involved, Dr. Harrington replied to his daughter. Well, you've survived, Tina said, and you've taken the identity of the one man that lets you continue to be as special as you are. But here you sit in an office that looks like it belongs to a second-grade math teacher, while a mass murderer sits in your CEO office. What are you going to do about it? Ron counted on me to be rash once, and he was right. I'm not going to make the same mistake twice. That's it for part 12 of The Awakening of Joel Singer. Don't forget to smash that like button, share with your friends, and tune in next time.